No Deathloop until 2021. It's now been confirmed by Bethesda. But I mean, the writing was pretty much on the wall. I mean, we haven't had that much gameplay apart from what I'm playing in the background. And I mean, even Cyberpunk, a game that's been delayed numerous times, has always given us a release date when it's done so. Deathloop was just nowhere to be seen, so this is pretty much par for the course. But I gotta say that, despite this news, it doesn't mean Deathloop's gonna be a bad game. I think it will probably be pretty decent for what it's trying to do. But I think the Arkane that a lot of us came to know and love, games like Dishonored, games like Prey, they're the games that we really enjoyed, that immersive sim style. I think they're pretty much gone in the current iteration. And I want to jump into what this means for the immersive sim and Arkane studios as a whole. Hi, Estelden here. So I am a massive Arkane fan. When Prey came out, I was deeply immersed in it. It was absolutely fantastic. I was expecting like an okay immersive sim, but I actually got like the best one since System Shock 2. It was an incredible game. And when I played it, I had like all these expectations in my head of, oh, where's Arkane gonna go next? What's gonna happen? There's so many possibilities here, it's infinite. And then reality kind of set in for me that was probably the peak of Arkane. And also, it was the end. It was like they were flying high. They were in that plane, they were up in the sky, and then like a window cracked, and then everything flew out that window and then got caught in the propeller. It was all fucking over, and they were pretty much dead. And that set in for me because of Bethesda and their direction. It was really clear around like late 2018 and onwards that Bethesda were going in a completely different kind of way of thinking when it came to video games. They weren't going for the single-player experience. We saw that with Fallout 76. I think with that game, Bethesda had in their mind that they were going to be like the next Rockstar. They were going to release their version of GTA 5. Everyone was going to play it for a decade. They wouldn't have to think about a sequel to Fallout for a long time. Instead, it fell obviously flat on its face, and they're left kind of scrambling. But going back to the Prey days, when it came out, we had games like Dishonored 2. Arkane were releasing critically praised games, but apparently they weren't selling, or at least to Bethesda's expectations. So it kind of meant that Bethesda were going to tap them on the back and say, right, so you've had your free reign, you've been making these stealth games, these little action immersive sim sort of games, and now you're going to be doing our bidding. Now you're going to be making the next multiplayer load of shite, you're going to be working with other studios to make other multiplayer shite, and that's going to be about it. And you just have to look at what happened. I mean, aside from Fallout 76, we had Wolfenstein Youngblood that was co-developed by Arkane. Travesty of a game. Everyone was misled into thinking it was just going to be a traditional game with a few multiplayer components. It felt like a looter shooter or some sort of garbage like that, which just doesn't suit Wolfenstein. It's fine for Borderlands, but this seemed really half-assed to really just sort of ham in that fucking multiplayer element. It was just no good at all. And it seemed like to me, even before all that, even before the multiplayer stuff started, it really felt to me like Zenimax and Bethesda were trying to force Arkane to do things that they didn't necessarily want to do. I know that Dishonored started out as a spiritual successor to the original Thief games. I'm not talking about that abomination from Square Enix, Thief 2014, I mean the original classics. Very, very good stealth games from the 90s and early 2000s. So they started off traditional stealth, that's what Dishonored was going to be, and then I think Bethesda got in their ear and wanted them to make it a bit more accessible to more people. They kind of thought, right, if you just make it a stealth game, we're only going to sell it to people who buy Hitman and other stealth games that are released these days. So you need to do something else. So they had to basically recreate it to be something you could play as an action game as well, and to me, it really hurt it. I know some people probably like the action elements, and they might like to play it that way, or they might do it stealth one playthrough, they might come back and do it action later on. But for me, I just really enjoyed playing it as a stealth game, because that's where you really got to take control of the level design. You got to really enjoy it for everything it was. Dishonored 2 had fantastic level design, it was incredible. But then the way that it played out was they had to make a lot of compromises to kind of force in that action element. And when we look at Deathloop and their design around that, I see more of the same, but it's now focused more on online elements rather than the forced accessibility. I'm sure it's got that too, but now it's sort of the two evils to me, at least when I think of this sort of thing. Now, when we look at Deathloop, they've got their tagline, if at first you don't succeed, die again. And they talk about 8 key targets you need to take out in the game. You're going to be playing as Colts, you've got to track these guys down. But there's going to be a spanner in the works, because Juliana, a rival assassin, whose sole mission is to take Colt out and keep that loop going. So, From what we've seen and what we've heard, it seems like Juliana is going to be someone you can control in like co-op or probably online as well. And it seems again like Arkane were probably told, right, you need to make a game, maybe it's along similar lines to Dishonored, but you need to have an online element so we can sell it to more people. I think Bethesda have looked at games like Divinity Original Sin 2, which is a game where if you just look at it for what it is, a CRPG, isometric classic style RPG, you couldn't really believe that it sold millions and millions of copies. But Bethesda have then probably gone, right, the reason it's sold, not because of the quality content, not the great gameplay, great combat, it's sold because you can play it co-op. So let's do it to Deathloop as well. Let's make Arkane design a game around that co-op aspect, and we just know it's going to sell. We're going to make up for all those lost earnings because we wanted to market Prey as like a reimagination of the old Prey for Xbox. And for some reason, no one gave a fuck and we're just confused, didn't buy the game. That's really what happened. Their marketing was just disgusting on that game. It was meant to be called Typhoon, I believe it was. It was meant to be its own thing, and they weren't allowed to do it because of Bethesda's meddling. And look where we are. Now it's Arkane who had to pay the brunt of it. Their CEO or the director, he had to head out the door because he was just disgusted by the direction they'd gone in. And this is pretty much it. So Deathloop, it seems like it might have some of the old Arkane elements. It might be a good game, but it's going to have that online aspect. And now that it's been delayed into next year, we don't know if that's because the game was in sort of troubled waters maybe for trying to force this stuff in, or if it's just because of what's going on in the world. And I'd say that even though I'm pretty pessimistic about some things, I do think that it probably was that. I think it's going to release. I don't think it's going to have the reception of other Arkane games, and that's because of Youngblood, which had a really, really middling reception. And given the director's gone now, I don't know if he was forced out by Bethesda or if he just left with his own free will, essentially. It could have been a little bit of both. It does seem like they're headed in a direction that's probably not going to be something that hardcore fans are really into. So the Arkane founder, who's left, who I'm talking about, that's Raphael Colantonio, he pretty much has come out and said, you're not making a game anymore, you're making a product in the AAA industry. This was from around a week or so ago, which is interesting timing now that Deathloop's been delayed. But you can just tell from his tone in this interview and this article that he was just really dissatisfied with the direction that AAA was going. And most of the games he made with Arkane Studios, they were under Bethesda. So the fact he's talking about, like, you're just making a product now, it really tells you what Bethesda were doing. There is not a chance from what he said here that he was allowed to just do his own thing at Bethesda. There was a lot of meddling that went in. He wasn't allowed to just make the game he wanted to make because Bethesda were going, accessibility, accessibility. We need to sell, sell, sell. Now, I understand that when you put a lot of money into a game like that you want to get that return, and you can't just go out and make like the most niche product ever and then expect to sell 1 million copies and recoup your budget. But Bethesda's meddling was really at the detriment of the series and then that direction going forward. Because you look at Prey, it's just a really damaged brand. People didn't want to play it because of the marketing associated with it. People were confused. They went in and expected like an FPS. That's what Bethesda had in the trailers. That's what I honestly thought we were going to get. I didn't think we were going to get a real like old school immersive sim experience like System Shock 2. I thought we were going to get like a watered down Bioshock type game. A lot of people hold Bioshock up as the gold standard of immersive sim, but I really don't think so. They don't have the level design of Arkane games, certainly not the level design of Prey. They don't have the creativity of Prey, where you can't really get away with playing it as an FPS. You've got to use a lot of cool stuff like the foam gun and all this massive arsenal you've got of different weapons and different abilities, which just make the gameplay drastically different depending on what direction you want to go in. It's really, really cool. And it's so unfortunate that it's a one-off experience, that Prey's dead. Arkane, in my opinion, are probably dead because this guy is a genius. Raphael here, he's done so much for the industry, I'd say. Even looking at Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, I believe it is, one of their earlier games. The melee combat in that game was so fucking incredible. And I've seen a lot of people talk about Cyberpunk, how the directors or the game designers of Cyberpunk have talked about the melee combat not really being spot on. They're trying to improve it. And many people have talked about Dark Messiah and gone, that is the gold standard of melee combat in a first-person title. That game released 15 years ago, and for many people it hasn't been matched, and that's more Arkane brilliance. They've just done so much. I wish Mr. Colantonio the very best. I'm going to really keep a close eye on Weird West. I'm sure it's going to be a great game, not like the AAA sort of quality of Dishonored or Prey. I'm sure it's going to be smaller. It could be just as good, but maybe not the same experience. But I really like that he's being allowed to work on his own thing, and I think he's earned it. He's dealt with Bethesda's bullshit for long enough. I know I wouldn't want to tolerate it for more than 5 fucking minutes. They sound awful. So the fact that he was able to kind of push through that, release a game like Prey, a game like Dishonored 2, that so many people loved, it's the reason that Arkane are many people's favourite developer. And I really just hope that Deathloop doesn't squander that. I hope the level design can at least be on par, even if some of the online elements aren't quite what the single-player audience really want to kind of see. I just hope that it doesn't truly interfere that, and it's at least a game that's decent enough and fans can get something out of it. I'm sure that's what Raphael wants as well. I'm sure he's hoping that they make the best of it, even though he's now gone, whether he was forced out or not. But the sad thing again with Bethesda is just the fact that they're utter hypocrites, and it's really sad that they're the ones, after they've kind of ruined Fallout, at least for me. They've been fucking around with Elder Scrolls for years and years with just the countless Skyrim cash grabs and all of that. The worst thing about it, though, was their hypocrisy back in 2017 when they were talking about Save Player 1. Everyone remembers that trailer that went out. This went out a few months after E3, and a few months after a few other games had come out, like The Evil Within 2, another single-player title that Bethesda published. And essentially they were trying to appeal to people and say, right, we're releasing all these single-player games in a world of live services and microtransactions. You should buy these games, they're going to be so immersive because they're single-player, you've got to get onto it. And it all sounded really good. I remember seeing this and thinking, yeah, look, I picked up a fair few of these games. I picked up Dishonored 2, I picked up Prey, and they were fantastic. I hope more people do as well. But Bethesda were liars. Because while they were bringing this sort of video out, they were already stabbing Arkane in the back. It seemed like Raphael Colantino was pretty much on the way out. I probably butchered his name now that I can't see it, but you know what I mean. So they forced him out, from the sounds of it. And this was already going on after this happened, because he left the studio not long after pre-release. So I think that's when they got that tap on the shoulder, and it was clear a new direction was coming, because sales expectations hadn't been met. And he was going to have, like, another hand tied behind his back when it came to development and trying to be creative. So not only that, the Wolfenstein series was already moving in another direction, because they would have been hard at work on Young Blood, which was, again, non-single-player game. Then Fallout 76 was right in the middle of development, getting towards the end. It came out less than a year later. So Bethesda were talking about saving single player when they couldn't give a fuck. They were already ready to chase that cash cow. They'd just been too late in doing it, because they would have started development on games like Prey years before. And they probably got halfway through and were right, fuck. Now the money's in like big loot box heavy games, and we're stuck making these shitty single player games, in our opinion. We should have been getting onto this, so we're going to have to hastily remarket Prey and trying to get some money in it. We're going to make a pathetic video about Player 1 and just trying to get that experience and just try and trick the audience into buying it and following us while we move in this other direction and chase the golden cash cow. And that's what they've been doing. We've had, Doom Eternal, which, as far as I know, I've been playing a bit of it, is a really competent FPS, and it is purely single player for at least its main campaign. There's not really any gimmicks. That's all cool, but it seems like that's going to be their gimmick. So their gimmick's going to be that's their single-player game. Maybe Starfield will be that too, but everything else are going to be chasing the multiplayer gravy train. Which is really sad, because they have a lot of talent in the studios that they publish for. It just seems like the management over there are just an absolute shambles. They just chase things around, they ruin things with their meddling, and now we're at this point where Arkane is a shell of its former self, I would say. Obviously, we've got to see what happens with Deathloop. Again, I'm crossing my fingers, but there's no way that Arkane Studios will be the same. They're not releasing another Prey. There's probably not going to be like another Dishonored 1 or Dishonored 2. It's going to be something where they take advantage of a live service of some sort, and they're going to have the online element to it. So if that's something you can live with, if you're fine with that, if you still get some of the Arkane spirit and level design, then good on you. I'm sure you'll get some enjoyment out of Deathloop. But for guys like me, who just want that single-player experience, they don't really want the gimmicks, well, we're probably going to have to look elsewhere. We're going to have to wait for Weird West or some other indie title to really put a spark in the genre. Certainly not Underworld Ascendant. That game looks pathetic. I touched on System Shock 2 earlier. For some people, they might know that System Shock 3 is in development. Get excited, people! Or not, because the game is going to be now developed by a team of Tencent's choosing. They've taken over development, which is probably only marginally better than Other Side Entertainment, who are clearly a complete joke from what we've seen of Ascendant and what a lot of the developers from there said about the game, that they were shocked. They probably didn't want it on their resume, but it was forced out anyway because management probably didn't really know what they were doing. But that's the sad state of things. So System Shock, not looking good. We've got to hope that Night Dive's remaster or remake, I think it is, of System Shock 1. We'll hope that's really cool and it sells really well, and it means maybe they can take more control of things next time. Maybe they can make their own System Shock, who knows? But for now, we're relying on something new, so keep your eyes peeled. Hopefully there's an immersive sim on the horizon that's purely single player, a pure classic, and hopefully it makes Mr. Raphael Colantonio really, really proud. So that's the state of Arkane, and we'll just need to see what happens. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like, please comment and subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.